this year I am like absolutely thrilled to welcome our special guest, David Morley. There's so much to be said about David, as his list of accomplishments is incredibly long, too long to go into on a Zoom call, but a few kind of tidbits. He's an internationally recognized expert on international development, humanitarian response, child well-being. His imprint has been felt from the narrowest alleys of Brazilian favelas to behind rebel lines in the Republic of Congo to the corridors of power in Ottawa. He is a member of the Order of Canada. He's led numerous high-impact agencies, including Save the Children Canada, Médecins Sans Frontières, and most recently UNICEF Canada. He's written 2 books, both of which were Canadian bestsellers. He's co-chair of the Stephen Lewis Foundation and on the board of the Canadian Network for Women and Children's Health. And David, most, I think importantly, has been a friend and an ally to Results for, more than a decade. And so, David, I just want to welcome you to this AGM.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. It's great. I'm so happy to be here, and you know how much I think of Results. So it's a delight. And whenever you ask something, I'll yes.
Thank you, David. So, David, just what I didn't share in the intro is that we are so privileged to be talking to you on a pretty monumental week. This is the eve of your retirement after an immensely impactful career, decades spent working in support of a better world. And maybe just to start, I'm wondering if you can share a bit about, your reflections on that career journey. I'm sure you have lots of reflections at this point and deep thoughts this week. Like, what drew you to work in the first place? Maybe some highlights.
Well, thank you. And yes, Thursday's my last day. This is in fact my last, I'm here at home. This is the last day that I've got that I'm wearing the blue. I got into this career by accident. I was unemployed. I wanted to, I'd graduated from Carleton in history. I wanted to be a history teacher. And but I needed to take a break, and I was living downtown on Cooper Street in a basement apartment. The view out of my window was the underside of cars. And a friend of my family who had been a moderator of the United Church, he was coming to town. By now, he was a member of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. He was one of the commissioners. So my mother got me to get dressed up, go see him. Maybe he could help me find a job. And I put on my tie. I went down to the Lord Elgin Hotel, to the Murray's restaurant that used to be there. And I started talking with Bruce, that was his name. And he said, he could see that I was hinting, maybe I could get a job. And he said, you've got your life to work in an apartment, to work in an office building in Ottawa or Toronto. Now is the time to leave Canada. And here's what you should do. You should go to this project with street children in Costa Rica, which he'd worked at, he'd volunteered at. And he said, here's the person. And Chris, I don't know if I ever told you this, I love this. He gave me the piece of paper with the name and the address, and that person has actually been my wife for the last 45 years. So it was, so every time I'm in Ottawa, I live in Toronto now, I always go to Murray, I also go to the Lord Elgin and give some thanks. So I was a middle-class Toronto boy, and I expected to find these kids who'd been destroyed by life, had been flattened, had nothing left, because they'd had lives that I couldn't imagine. And instead, I found this group of children who were feisty and funny and could make friends and were so smart. They'd had to be, because they'd been living on the streets. And I was going to go for 3 months. And after about 2 weeks, I knew I wasn't going to become a history teacher. I didn't know what I was going to do, except that I wanted to help those kids, the particular ones that I knew and fell in love with, and just try. It sounds corny as anything, but I just wanted to try and do something to help kids make the world better, and didn't know what it would be, and I just wanted to do it. It filled my heart, and so I kind of stumbled into this.
I love that. I mean, you know how many of us stumble into this. It's great advice. There's a lot of young people on the call who are starting their career thinking maybe they want to do this kind of work. And I know we have another question on the page that I want to, but I'm curious about the shift along the way. Did you follow your heart when other career opportunities, as I said, from Médecins Sans Frontières to Save the Children to UNICEF, they just presented themselves and you leapt, or how did that?
Yeah, you know, I stayed at Pueblito. The name of the organization that I went to in Costa Rica was Pueblito, and I came back to Canada, was fundraising. I became the executive director. It was a one-person office, so you know somebody had to be the executive director. And I worked there. When I went, my path was not this normal path, I think, or what people expect. I worked there. So I volunteered for 2 years. I ended up staying in Costa Rica, came back, worked there as the staff person. We grew a tiny bit in Canada, but I worked there for 18 years. And working for an unknown agency is not considered a career path, but I loved it. I mean, I loved it. But I could, when I sensed, 18 years, that's a heck of a long time. And I was, when I didn't feel the fire anymore, I saw, the Médecins Sans Frontières job was advertised, and I applied and I got it. And with Médecins Sans Frontières, my move to Save the Children was different, because I found for me, I stayed at MSF for 7 years, but it's not a but. It's incredible humanitarian emergency response. But for my personality, I began to realize I like the long-term development. I like, it takes time, but there's the engagement with communities, that engagement going on. I like, you need the emergency response, but I'm better at the long term. And so then I went to Save the Children, and then to here, to UNICEF.
Well, thank goodness you have, because you've had such, I've known you along the pathways of different career fields, and you've had such tremendous impact. And, so much of it is just doing work that connects heart and brain, and then following your gut. It's about organs, I guess, but that's what it's been for me. But so, I guess along the way, David, this is one of those kind of curiosity questions, no right or wrong answer, of course. But so are there any people or stories that really, we heard about the kids that you met in the first sort of stint, but are there any people or stories that really stand out as being particularly memorable or impactful, like the people or incidents that have stayed with you that kept you inspired to continue the work? And can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I go back, as I've been getting ready to retire, I go back, and I do go back early to the beginning. And one of those kids in particular, I was doing after school programs, and his name was Giovanni, and he'd been a pickpocket, and had kept a younger brother, sister alive on the streets by picking pockets and doing stuff. And he would say, I used to wear, because I'd wanted to be a history teacher, of course, I used to have a little tweed jacket that I would wear, sort of. And I'd keep my wallet on the inside. We'd be sitting next to each other helping him. I'd be helping him with his homework or something. And he'd suddenly, my wallet would be in his hand. And he'd go, David, you have to be careful. You never know who you're going to run into around here. And he always gave it back. And because he'd had to do that. He'd had to have that skill. And once I said to him, so, hey, what was it like to live on the streets, to sleep on the streets? And he got mad at me. He didn't smile at that. He said, David, I never slept on the streets, and I never let my brother and sister sleep on the streets. Every night I'd go to the garbage, I'd get newspaper, I'd lay it out on a park bench, and those were the sheets, because nobody was ever going to say that Giovanni Nunez could not give his brother and sister a bed when they really needed it. And so Giovanni was always a touchstone, and because of the internet, I mean, we're still, like, we're both grandparents now. Because like I was 22 and he was 12, so it was like a massive gulf. Well, you know, I'm 67, so he's 57. So and his life and that of his brother and sister and the other kids that I knew, well, I still get to know them through Facebook, and to see them and to know and to hear their response, because I began to wonder, like, what the heck am I doing here? What are we doing here as Canadians who, when we go to in that type of international service, you know, are we getting in the way? Is it helpful? And I think there are many questions, good, important questions that are going on right now about what should our relationship be in international development. But what I did learn from Giovanni and from others, because we talk about it on Facebook, that they felt that we made a difference. There was a group of Canadian volunteers, and I think that's true. And what it isn't all the stupid cultural mistakes I made in Latin America, but it was, you know, you were talking about it earlier. It was the heart and the brain and coming together to simply, it sounds corny, but simply to try and make the world better. And then, you know, there are other people and oh my goodness, people in South Sudan. A young girl who she was 13, and she braved the civil war in order to come into a town which had been destroyed by ethnic violence, to take her grade 8 exams because education was going to build peace. When I think of Chris, we were there together. We were just there together in Kenya, those community health workers that we were with. Those people are changing the world. Those community health workers that we were with in Kibera in Nairobi. And those strong people, it's just a privilege to get to walk alongside them on that.
You know, yeah, it's life-changing in a way. And for the folks on the call, David's alluding to the fact that many of you will know results led a parliamentary delegation in January, and we spent a couple of days with UNICEF in Kenya, and we were incredibly fortunate that David came along for that part of the journey. And so when he speaks of traveling with us and the parliamentarians, it was really those kind of frontline health workers and traveling through Kibera, which is one of the largest sort of urban settlements in Africa. But it was just so powerful and so fueled with optimism and hope. And actually, you know, David, from the very local to the global, my next question, I guess, is because, I mean, I've been grappling a lot with this and thinking about it. And I think, you know, it's the kind of constant refrain in the headlines, but, you know, the world seems to be more complex than ever. It's a sea of converging crises, as we like to say: climate, conflict, pandemics, poverty. It's easy to become demoralized and give up. And I think I know where the answer might be coming from you. But one thing I've always valued in you, as everybody on the call is hearing now, is your sense of optimism, your unrelenting commitment to keep pushing forward. And the question is just simply, how do you stay motivated? How do we stay motivated and committed, even in the face of such seemingly immense global challenges?
You know, in my career path, I didn't talk about one nonprofit I worked at that was domestic. That was the only time that I started feeling, because it was a great, I was working with Adrian Clarkson and John Ralston Saul. I mean, that was a treat. That's before we knew each other. But what a gift it is, first of all, to be able to work for an organization or volunteer for an organization, because I volunteer for organizations too, that are making a difference. that are trying, like we may just be pushing a little pebble up a hill, but God, we get to do it, and we get to see. We know we see. We get to work alongside, even if many people will never meet. But boy, they're incredible. It's like there are times that any of the places I've worked, I feel, and I feel I get to be part of a chain of people trying to do good. It's hokey, just doing good, but I'm a simple guy, and that is that really moves me. And also the fact that since I've been at UNICEF, I look back to when UNICEF was founded. And UNICEF was founded when there was famine in Europe, there was famine in China, there was famine in Japan, and there was all that refugee movement at the end of World War II. Like World War II just didn't end and everything was all sweet, right? There were awful things, and today, yes, there are awful things, and climate really is the different thing, I think. But we've got tools now that we could never imagine, and we've seen the under 5 mortality rate plummet in my lifetime. When I was born, the under 5 mortality rate when I was born is this here. I was born here in Canada. Well, Kenya's is what it was in Canada, the 50s and 60s. That's incredible progress for children. The number of people who are educated. We get to be part of this global revolution.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. Revolutions are fun. Well, I guess,
Well.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah.
This revolution is pretty incredible.
Yeah, a revolution in child survival for sure. I mean, I even feel like when I started doing this work more than a dozen years ago, like malaria deaths have been cut in half. There's been massive increases. Again, that child survival revolution has been impressive. There's lots of places to find pause and optimism, I guess. But so I'm just giving the audience a heads up that we will have time for a couple of questions from them after I ask you this next question, in case they want to kind of gear up. But kind of speaking of that, I just came back from the global vaccines. There was a global vaccine impact summit that was held by Gavi, the Global Vaccines Alliance. And I was just so inspired by the fact that Gavi, alongside UNICEF, really celebrated a milestone of having reached 1 billion children with vaccines since Gavi's inception. Like 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 kids are at least getting some vaccination. But, there's still like 14 million, I think, children that are what they called 0-dose kids. They've never received a single vaccine. And I think, concerted effort to reach those 0-dose kids would be like a real game changer. And this is kind of the theme for our year, game changers. So what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities for hope and impact, or the biggest potential game changers when it comes to child survival or health or well-being, or any of the issues that we've worked on together, education, any of those things?
One is technical. And you mentioned it, malaria. There's been really good clinical trials in Burkina Faso that UNICEF was involved with, along with, I think it's AstraZeneca, that have had good results. And so if we can actually find a malaria vaccine, well, that would be incredible. But I also feel that the game changers, if more countries invest more, at least on the child survival side, in the community health workers. And those community health workers can start to, they're delivering frontline primary health care. And more children survive. And then when more children survive, you see that parents start saying, we're seeing it. Families get smaller because parents are going, okay, our kids are going to survive. I want to invest in my kids in a special way. And that means they advocate for more education. So we see advocating for education coming from these families whose kids are surviving more. I mean, it's not but it's, to me, the beginning of the virtuous circle that happens in so many places starts with with the fewer under fives dying. Because and besides, what the heck? Having your child die, that breaks your heart.
Yeah.
And so there's that too, there's that toll on people as well as the toll on societies. So I think those community health workers are game changers, and they're leading the revolution. And this revolution is doing more. And Chris, okay, I know I've got all that stuff, but you're part of the revolution too. You and everybody at Results, right? Because we've been able to work together. I just hope everybody know. I think that Chris Dendys is a national treasure, and she's made an incredible difference in those two summits, in the Muskoka Summit, the Charlevoix Summit, and there were people like me. Sorry, Chris, I didn't know I was going to do this to you. There are people like me who knew how to deliver programs, and Chris knew how to do clever in the good sense, wise advocating and messaging with parliamentarians, and the combination was unbeatable. It was great. So sorry, Chris. I'll just move on now.
Yeah, thanks. Now that I'm all teary-eyed, but certainly, yeah, thank you for reminding us about the Muskoka Initiative, the Charlevoix Declaration. The people on this call, David, some of whom have been doing advocacy with Results for literally decades, and have been really instrumental in that child survival revolution, that commitment to a better world. We're really the driving force behind that. It was just a small part, but thank you for reminding me of that collaboration, because it was pretty amazing and powerful. So thank you for that. So I just wonder, just going to the audience, if we have maybe a moment or two for a couple of questions. I can't see if there's any hands up, or if you want to throw them in the Slack.
Blaze.
My hand's up, Chris.
Okay, so I'm going to take two questions in a row, and then David can respond to both. So Blaze, maybe first.
Yeah,
go ahead, Blaze.
Thank you, David. It's great to finally meet you after so many years. And your remarks remind a couple of stories, but I was the first full-time Results employee in a little basement office in Chapel Street. And I remember we did a lot of op-eds, and one was on essential medicines, and the campaign to try to get Big Pharma to do more with that. And you were with MSF at the time, very involved. And Alan Castles, my good friend and colleague, and I wrote one. I forget where it was published, but I remember it engendered a response from Big Pharma, sort of saying, we are so doing a lot on essentials, and we even work with NGOs, and we have an agreement even with MSF to do this and that. And we thought, did we make a mistake? Are they really? And but within a day, there was an op-ed by you saying, rebutting that in unequivocal terms, we have never had an agreement with Big Pharma. We have no arrangement, and they're actually dragging their feet, just like Blaze and Alan said, and should do more. And I waited all this time to thank you. And
I love that.
And I just want to say as well that it really illustrated a point about a bias toward action, which is really a results thing. And we didn't have to talk and do wordsmithing of a draft and see if it fit with our policy and all that stuff. You just went and right there in print within a couple of days. So that was great.
That's awesome. Blaze is a pioneer.
That's great, Blaze. That brings back lots of memories of that particular fight on the patents. Yeah,
which was ultimately a victory, right? That was
yeah.
Is there one more question in the before we? Well, there is a question in the chat about day to day. Maybe that's our last question. Then we'll go to the closing one from me.
Well, my day-to-day, well, Bruce McLeod might have been right, because there are times when my day-to-day looks like working in an office in Toronto. But it depends what you're going to be doing, because I think the people who are interested in, like, our government relations people, our advocacy people, who are spending a lot of time working together in coalition with organizations like Results and with volunteers to talk to politicians, talk to staffers, talk to each other. What are the best ways to move forward? And it's a great deal of work, rewarding, because I believe, Blaise, like, remembering back to then, I do think that usually the good guys win. Just sometimes it takes an awful long time. But it's and everything, one of the things too I find about working in an organization that's trying to make the world better, rights organization, trying to do action, is that everything we do gets to be suffused with meaning. Like, even when I'm doing an expense report or something, like, it's all part of, because the machinery that we're doing is filled with meaning, and that's a gift.
David, maybe one other question from the audience and then I'll close. But
Yeah.
So the question, I think, is a good one. What policy or commitment has made a big difference from your view in terms of something that you've worked on, we've worked on, the world has worked on, but you particularly?
I think for ending poverty, if I'm thinking of one thing, I come back to the virtuous cycle of the community health workers and of Muskoka, and because one of the things that Muskoka did right, first of all, is as I say, families didn't have to deal with the death of children, and that's so that's the emotional strain. It's more than strain, but then, because a lot of that money went into training community health workers, we were they're often who would get it's a small bit of money, but they get some money, and so it raises the level of education in a community, and it's these women who usually who are now getting income, and then they're going to deal with it, usually helping their families better than men will. And I mean, that's a very, very broad stroke, but it's statistically true. And so I really think that kind of social service policy it can lift all boats. And when I look back, I'm not going to go into, are there 5 things that I count that I think really made a difference? One of them was access to medicine place, and Muskoka is another, so I'm biased, but that's what I think.
I love it, and I agree with you. So there you go. It must be right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, David, I can't thank you enough for being here with us. I really just wanted, in your closing moments with us, I wonder if you have any last reflections or advice for the dozens and dozens of Results volunteers and staff and board members, advocates who are on the call. Over to you.
Never doubt, that what you're doing by volunteering with Results does not make a difference, because it does make a difference. Results make a difference, and all of us working together, volunteering together, coming together, I think we make a difference, and we see it in that child survival revolution. We see it in the places where things are going better. It's if we can stay away from conflict, if we can figure out the climate, things get better, and we can help make that happen. When peace comes, things get better, and I think we've seen it in many places. So what you do is what we all do, I think, is being peacemakers, and You know, people say the UN doesn't work. So Chris, you know, you're gonna have to mute me probably. People say the UN doesn't work. Well, the Security Council doesn't work for keeping peace, perhaps. But agencies and NGOs and all of us, yeah, we work. And the world is better than it would have been otherwise because of all of this, all of the efforts that you do, that we do together by working together. And that is wonderful. It's not good enough yet because it'll never end, but it's wonderful.
Those are beautiful thoughts from an incredible human being. And David, I have to tell you that you've been a personal inspiration and an ally over the years, and I'm so deeply inspired always by you and grateful. And we have a little, in a minute, I'm going to ask everybody to turn off their mutes so that we can give you hurrah in the results fashion. But we also wanted to share with you this little, Denise, I don't know if you want to, we have made you an honorary member of Results Family for Life, the Champion and Friend Award, because you have been such a part of our campaigning and of our effort, and just the work that you do has been inspirational in terms of our efforts. So maybe everybody can unmute and we can all just thank David, full screens, maybe all of our cameras on, and just give you an absolute hurrah, because you are an